Howdy folks, it's time to go. It's 2:30 p.m. and I caught enough fish today, but I want to record an answer to a question that I've gotten a few times. Victor, how do you set the drag on your reels? And I actually recorded once a video explaining how I set the drag on my reels, but I recorded it at home. It was 40 minutes long and sitting on the couch, and I myself couldn't stand watching myself just talk on the couch for 40 minutes. So I decided to record pretty much the same thing, but on the lake, where I can give you a nicer background, than just staring at my face for half an hour. And also I can, while I'm talking, I can hopefully catch a few fish and show you exactly what I mean. So I'm gonna cast around here. There's plenty of fish around here. We should catch a little bit of everything. But I wanna first, I'm not even gonna cast because when I cast I get distracted. I wanna first tell you, the question is, Victor, how do you set the drag on your reels? And I will tell you how I set the drag on my reels. But this is not my recommendation for everybody. Because I'm getting old, and when people get old, they like to fish a certain way, and they no longer care if that's the right way or the wrong way. You get used to something and you just fish the way you enjoy and nothing else matters. But I will spend the first 5 minutes or so, hopefully just 5, to tell you what is kind of the general, principle of how you set your drag. So in general, if you put 5-pound line on your reel, you want to set your drag to something like not even 4 pounds, to something like 3.5 pounds max. This is the max that you should be setting your drag if your line is 5 pounds. How do you know how much you are setting? Let's say you want 1 pound of drag on your reel. Well, a lot of these water bottles are exactly 450 milliliter water. That's exactly 1 pound. Anyway, you can get a bottle of water or a bottle of anything, and you can weigh it and see how much it weighs and tie it to your line. And when you start lifting it, the line should start just slipping. If it's coming off too easy, your drag is less than the weight. If it doesn't pay line at all, your drag is more than the weight. But if it's just slipping, that's how much pressure you have on your line, on your drag. The general principle is you want something like 25% less than the strength of the line. That should be your max drag. So if you have 10-pound line, the max drag that you should have is like 7.5 pounds. And there is opinions on this, but this is my opinion. Because, first of all, 10 pound is the strength of your line out of the box. Okay, I'm going to try to protect you from the wind while I'm talking. 10 pound is the strength of the line out of the box. But after you fish it just 1 hour and you catch a few fish, it's no longer 10 pounds, right? It's going to lose immediately. I don't know. I don't want to get into numbers. Let's say 1 pound. Then you have knots. They loosen the line also. Then even if you have no knots and your line is 100% strong, if you set the drag to release at 5 pounds and your line is 5 pounds, you will see that when you pull from the front, the line will break. That's because under load, there is additional drag or resistance created by the line rubbing on the guides. Under load, that is significant. When you're just casting, it's not significant. But under load, even with fish, still not significant. But if you load 5 pounds on the line and you start reeling, then you have significant extra resistance just from the line rubbing on the guides. So maybe 75% of the strength of the line is the absolute max that one should have if you don't want to lose fish, and if you don't want your line to break. If you ask me, even 50% of the strength of the line is too much. But I'm talking about maximum is probably 75%. Now let's start talking about me. I still don't want to cast because when I cast I'll get distracted. Let's talk about me now. This rod here has 2.1 pound line that breaks at 1.8 pounds, but let's say it has 2 pound line. To give you an example, now we're talking about me, not what you should do and what anybody should do. I don't want to tell people what to do. That would make me a Democrat. I'm telling you how I do it, and I'll give you my reasons, and I don't care if my reasons are correct or not. The drag on this reel is probably right now about 50 grams. That's how much pressure takes to release line from this reel. 50 grams, which is probably, I don't know, let's say 1/10 of 1 pound. Even though my line is so thin and brittle, I could safely set the drag on this reel to, let's say, 1 pound, because the line is 2 pounds. I could set it to 1 pound, and I don't know, unless the line is damaged, I shouldn't break. But this ester line can break even at 1 pound. It's kind of unpredictable, but okay, if it was mono, it shouldn't break at 1 pound. My drags are all between 50 and 100 grams. That's where they release line. And I'm gonna tell you why now. For me, folks, it all started with carp fishing. I know that's a long story and I haven't cast yet, but that's the only way for me to tell this story. For me, the drag kind of analysis, and not even analysis, but observation of how drag works and how do I want it, started about 20 years ago with carp fishing. Is it even 20 years ago? Maybe 25 years ago. Gosh, maybe 30 years ago if I count Bulgaria. But about, let's say, 25 years ago, as soon as I came in the United States, we found an amazing carp lake. It was not a big deal to catch a 35-pound carp out of that lake. It was not a big deal. And with these carp rods, but we had to cast kind of far, about 100 yards, I would say. And I couldn't put more than 0.32 millimeter line, 0.30 to 0.32 on all of my rods. I didn't care how strong the line was. I only cared about diameter. More than 0.32 millimeter, which is about 7 pound mono, 6, 7, 8, something like that, depending on manufacturer. So anyway, I know too long of a story, but I was fishing for 30-pound carp with 7-pound line. And you fish all day for a few runs, but when you get a run and when you lift the rod, it's a 12-foot carp rod, and the line stretches and the carp is all the way over there, like 100 yards out, and it's a 20 or 30-pound fish, and you have a little bit of stretch on the line. Now you have this absolutely solid pressure on the line and on the rod. The line is whistling even a little bit from the wind, but the most important thing is the drag was set. You have to be careful with the drag. You don't want the line to break, and you don't want the carp to run into a snag. And every lake has snags, and every carp knows where the snags are. And when you lift the rod, guys, all I could hear is the drag on my reels go, and then when the carp starts to make a run, it'll go. And I fished for only carp for the first 10, 15 years in the United States. Nothing but carp. Not even catfish, just nothing but carp. And this kind of drag performance is now embedded so deeply in my brain that anything else, if the drag sounds any other way, it bothers me. I can't stand it. The stock drag on the Complex XR and the Suara XR sounding like zzz, 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 zzz. I want to crush the rod on my knee and throw it in the water. I absolutely cannot stand it. I want the drag to be smooth. Okay? The drag has to release line smoothly. Everything else just bothers me. If I lose fish, I lose fish. I don't care what happens. I don't fish tournaments. I just released a 13-inch crappie here. And I'm keeping fish today. The drag for me has to be smooth. The other thing is, my drag has to be set. The pressure has to be set exactly on the edge. Let me tell you what I mean by on the edge. On the edge means when the fish is doing nothing, there should be no drag sound. But also every time the fish does something, the fish does anything. You know, when you lift the rod, first on setting the hook, if there was fish there, if I made connection, I want the drag to slip a little bit on the hook setting. I want the drag to slip a little bit. When I set the hook, it should be like and then the fish, after a few seconds, it's a little shocked. Then after a few seconds, almost always, the fish makes a little run, even if it's a small bluegill. After you set the hook, because when you set the hook, you turn the head your way. So now the fish is facing you. It cannot pull backwards. It needs to turn around and pull away from you. When the fish turns around and pulls away from me and makes the first run, I want to hear my drag. I want to hear my drag even if it's a 7-inch bluegill. If it's a 5 or 6-inch bluegill, okay, I scratch those off. I don't need to hear drag on those. But I don't care if I'm fishing for 7-inch bluegill or 8-inch crappie or 20-pound catfish or 30-pound carp. When I lift the rod, I want this rod to slip on the hook set, and then I want every time the fish does something, I want my drag to slip a little bit. Every time the fish does something, I want the drag to slip a little bit. This is how I'm used to. I'm going to try to catch a few fish now, hopefully demonstrate what I just told you, but when I set the hook, it will slip a little bit. When it makes a run, it will slip again. The rest of the time, when the fish is just catching up its breath and it's not really pulling, the rest of the time when I'm just slowly reeling and the fish is not really pulling hard, I want the drag to sound like this. This is what I want. I want just very slow clicks, but I still want it to, as long as there is pressure, I want my drag to slip just a little bit, ever so slightly to slip. And this is precisely what I mean by the edge. Because you drag, even when you fish for these fish, sometimes I adjust the drag mid-fight. Because if it's slipping too much, it bothers me. If it's not slipping when I felt the fish pulled, made a run and the drag didn't slip, it still bothers me. I want to hear what is going on with the fight through the drag. I want to hear it. And when I hear the drag slip like this, when it barely slips, what do these slow clicks mean? These slow clicks are telling me that the drag is ready. That as soon as a fish makes a little run, the fish will pay line. That's what the slow slip is telling me. The slow slip is telling me precisely that the drag is set exactly on the edge. And I'm still kind of checking it with my hand when I cast. Here is a fish right away. So see how I set the hook and it slipped a little bit. Now the rest of the time it's kind of just ever so slightly slipping. But when I pull on the fish, because I pull on the fish, I reel up. When I pull on the fish, then I reel up. I don't reel constantly. I kind of pull with my rod. You could almost, folks, if you know what I'm doing, you can close your eyes and you can tell what's going on with the fight just by listening to my videos. You will know exactly when did I set the hook. You will know, was there a fish? You can tell how big the fish is. You can tell how many runs did the fish do. Like, it's almost like I'm using the drag for data transmission. Like, I'm enjoying not just the physical pressure of fighting the fish, not just the visual, seeing the rod bend and, enjoying all of that, but I'm enjoying the audio also. The audio is just part of the picture. For me it is. The only reason I don't like drag that is too loose is because the sound bothers me. It's not because it's creating a line twist, even though it is. And even in Japan, I don't understand. In Japan, people, instead of relying on their skill to kind of fight the fish, they rely on the drag to do all the job. Maybe we have to cast a swim bait because the wind is too strong. Even in Japan, you can see people catch fish by the bank and they start reeling as fast as they can. And it just sounds like a coffee grinder, like zzz, 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 zzz. What are you doing? Like, you didn't even retrieve 1 foot of line. I saw you didn't retrieve 1 foot of line, but you reeled 20 times. Now I can tell you that it doesn't matter if you have Stella or Exist. If you reel 20 times and you don't retrieve even 1 foot of line, you created exactly 20 loops of twist on your line. Every 1 turn of the rotor without retrieving line is exactly 1 full loop of line twist. Now I'm done talking, but the wind started blowing. I wanted to catch a few fish. I might cut the video depending on the audio. I do want to catch a few fish and kind of reel them slow and tell you what I mean. There is a fish. Okay, so you heard how it slipped pretty good when I set the hook, but you can hear the slips. When I'm not pulling on the fish, I'm reeling, it's just slipping. Then when I pull, you can hear it slip. Now the drag is right now set perfectly for my taste, for this kind of fish. If I caught a 5-inch bluegill instead of this 9-inch crappie, the drag wouldn't sound the same. And I might not adjust it for 5-inch bluegill, but if I was catching larger fish on every cast, let's say 12-inch crappie only, or I don't know, let's say 13-inch white bass on every cast, the drag for me is not fixed. The drag is set depending on the pressure that the fish creates, and it has to be right on the edge of the pressure that that particular fish creates. Here's another. Missed him. There's one. Pretty close here. Here's the slow clicks. And the fish made a run and you heard it. This is, it's a yellow bass. That's a good yellow bass. That's a totally edible yellow bass. This lake has some nice yellow bass, folks. Yeah, this is how I enjoy fishing. Oh boy, bite right here. Oh, oh man. Yeah, I'm not untangling this right now. Let's switch to something else and untangle this later. Let's try twitching a trout magnet. Let's try to catch one more, folks, on the Suara XR, because that trout was not a good example. And then I actually want to catch a couple with the swim bait, because it's a different rod, different reel, different sound. I want to catch a couple with the swim bait and then I'm gonna let you go. But you can hear exactly when I'm pumping. You can close your eyes. Right now it's just slipping a couple of times. I'm just holding, and it's slipping ever so slightly. When I increase the pressure, it starts to slip again. It's just tuck, 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 tuck right now. I'm just holding. When I pump, you can hear what is happening with the fight just by listening. Because the drag is on the edge. Because the drag is on the edge. See, even now stay with me just two more fish. Let me catch a couple of fish with the swim bait also, because it's on a different rod, different reel. It's actually probably 11 inch. And different sound. But just to see that it doesn't matter if I'm fishing with float or twitch a trout magnet or swim a swim bait, my rods, my drag always sounds the same. And I'm not just recording this video now. I have 500 videos. I have 500 videos online that you can go and you will see it's not exactly the same, because sometimes even I cannot adjust it on the edge, but I strive to make it on the edge, and most of the time I succeed. But sometimes when I buy a brand new reel like these Suara XRs and Complex XRs, you can hear videos of me fishing the Suara XR and Complex XR where the drag doesn't sound nice in the beginning. But then I put felt, I put the iFish grease, and it started to sound the way I want it to sound. Tap. You can hear exactly when I'm pumping. You can hear when I'm pulling and when I'm just holding. It doesn't matter what rod I have. It doesn't matter they sound the same. Now, let me tell you about something. Think about something. This line here on the swim bait is 2.3 pound ester that breaks around 1.8 pounds. And I use the same line for twitching. But the line on the float over there, that is sitting over there tangled, you see that honey color Varivas mono? That line is 4 pounds, and it actually breaks over 4 pounds. It's stronger than 4 pounds. If I was setting my drag based on the strength of the line, it would be, my floats, the drag would be at least double. It would have to be twice as strong as on my 2 pound ester lines. But if you listen to my videos, twitch or swim or float fish, they all sound about the same. And the difference is not coming from the different line, like one is stronger, one is less strong, but it comes from the fact that every reel has a little bit different drag washers inside. Some of them have a lot of surface and they sound very consistent. Some of them don't have a lot of surface, and even with the iFish grease, they cannot sound that consistent. But iFish grease, I can tell you, available at ifishtackle.com, will slow down any drag. I don't care what drag it is, it will make it slip and click slower. Do you always want it slower? No. Some reels, usually the cheap reels, actually that's a paradox, but for me the cheap reels have better sounding drag because they have bigger felt discs and they have more surface and they're just more consistent. And the cheaper reels like the $50 Sahara and the $60 Legalis, the drags actually sound better than the $300 Vanford and Presso reels. That's another nice crappie. Actually has a few eggs with it. Alright folks, the airplane is finally gone, so we can do kind of a clear record of one last fish with the last reel of the video. Listen to the sound of the 2023 Legalis LT. The 2023 Legalis LT has absolutely awesome drag out of the box. You don't need to put any iFish grease. You don't need to swap any carbon with felt. You don't need to do any of that monkeying around that you need to do to these expensive versions of the Vanford, the Soiree XR and Complex XR. You know, spent $300 on a reel and then you have to replace carbons and whatnot. That may be a little bit too tight. You can hear the slips. When I pull, you can hear that I pump, that I pull. Or when the fish turns around, the rest of the time it just slips. It's, to tell you the truth, I haven't fished it in a few hours. It seems a little bit tight, and this crappie was a little bit small. So let's catch one more fish. I told you that's the last one, but I think it was a little bit too tight. So let's catch just one more fish with the new Legalis. I mean, it sounds super nice. And I think it sounds super nice because I complained. See, when I pull, you can tell I'm pulling. You can close your eyes and you're gonna know exactly when I'm pulling and when I'm just holding, and the rest of the time it's still slipping a little bit. Tat, 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 tat. It's not gonna be, of course, absolutely perfect on every fish. Whoa, what is this fish running? Is this a trout or something? Why is it running like this? Is this a trout? I'll take one more trout before I go home. If it is a trout. It's not a trout, but this is a absolutely awesome fish to end the video with. Probably 11, maybe even 11.5-inch crappie. But it wouldn't matter if it's 11 or 13 or 8. If iFish caught it, it will sound just the same. Lost my trout magnet, but we're going home anyway. Look here, what a healthy crappie. But yeah, this is how iFish sets his drag and why. And do I recommend it to other people? No, I don't. I'm just telling you why I do it. Thank you guys for watching this one. And yours truly is disconnecting from beautiful Tennessee. Bye bye.